It seems like you're good at every possible thing alive.
No, Paul.
Sorry.
I was like, I knew this was
Not Paul Engelmeyer. Who said Paul
I mean,
Engelmeyer?
the games, like,
Sorry. Oh, the games.
I think
That's probably like the only thing he's good at.
That's all he does.
But you know, there are people that are like legitimately like good at everything, and when they start excelling at things naturally, it doesn't seem like they're even trying. It's very easy for us to just give up because we're just like, sorry. Yeah, well, you should be sorry. But it's very easy for us to give up because we can just be like, hey, this person is so good that we're never going to get to that point. So what's the reason of even trying? And throughout this series, we've been talking about different people and been showing you guys what faith looks like at the different levels. And today we're going to be talking about what it means to have hot faith. And I just wanted to preface this that a lot of us are not here yet. But do not be discouraged by that. God brings these people to you to encourage you and help show you guys the way to live. But He's not saying that He doesn't love you if you're not there yet. God still loves you even though you're still working on your faith. And even though you're still working on becoming all God has called you to be. So before I get into the full message, I just want to pray over this whole message. Lord, thank you for bringing us all here today. Thank you for letting us be able to have a fun time. Thank you for letting us be able to have the privilege of being able to even come here. There are a lot of countries where people can't even come into this place, and people couldn't come into church and worship you with so openly. But God, you've put us in a place where we can worship you openly and where we can actually show our love to you. So God, I pray that we never get discouraged, and I pray that we are encouraged by the words that you have to bring today, and I pray that we actually try to put these words into action. I pray that these aren't just words that come from a person's mouth, but I pray that these are words that actually come into our heart, that come into our lives. So I pray that you make me say all the things that you want me to say, and not just things that I say, not just things that are of my own opinions. I pray that it's from your word. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So like I said, it's easy for us to get real discouraged. But here's the thing. There are some awesome people in the Bible that do some awesome things that you guys no one can really understand, because it's hard for us to put ourselves in the shoes of these people. And throughout the last few sermons that you guys have heard me preach, I've been preaching from Daniel. And that's because I've been reading in Daniel, and there was a lot of stuff that I did not know that Daniel did. Like, I didn't know that these things were in the book of Daniel. Like, the funny thing is, in the book of Daniel, everyone knows, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Everyone heard it, the fiery furnace, everything. That's in Daniel. Okay, Little Bonnie, if that's how you remember it. Curse you, VeggieTales. But yeah, so the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then there was a story that I showed you 2 or 3 weeks ago, where it was the story of King Nebuchadnezzar and how he was turned insane because he was too prideful. And then there was his son, King Belshazzar, who ended up getting assassinated, and he ended up losing his kingdom because he was also too prideful. And so we see all of these in Daniel, and we see some of these stories kind of connect. And the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego actually connects to this story that I'm going to talk about tonight. And it's the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel in the lion's den, a lot of people feel like we know that story. A lot of people feel like we understand that story, but we don't understand what God is trying to tell us through this story. Because Daniel had a very interesting life, and he taught us a lot about how we can live today. So first off, just to kind of set the scene for the story, they've already established that Daniel was this really cool guy. And Daniel was doing all this awesome stuff, and he was able to interpret dreams. He was able to do amazing things, and kings started to notice this. And so him and a few other guys were put as administrators and satraps of the kingdoms. So they would be able to put on a high pedestal. But then Daniel just seems to actually shine in those amount of people. So it says in Daniel 6, 3 through 4, it says, "Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs. But they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him, because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent." Now, just kind of explain what is going on in this story. Basically, everyone knows that one person that is just really good at something, and you want to try and find something wrong with them. Like, you're just like, there's got to be something wrong with you. There's no way you can be that good at everything. That's not how it works. And so you get all mad. And like, I remember there was one dude in my art class. Ooh, he made me so mad. He didn't even try to. Like, dude came into the room and he would just like could paint anything. He could draw anything. And it just looks like you just stepped right into like real life. Like, it doesn't look like a picture. It looked like a photograph. And see, that annoyed me, because every time I'm sitting there making like some Bobo-looking stick figures, and then I look over and then he's like painting something that looks like real life. And I'm just like, the heck? How? What are you doing? And the worst thing was, this dude was in the art program that I was in for less time. So he had came in like a year or two later than everyone else. So I'm like, I've had technically more training than you, but you're still a whole lot better than me. So I was trying to find so much wrong with him, and I couldn't. So, I made up stuff. I was like, dude's just cocky, He thinks he's all that. Thinks he's all that in a bag of chips. He didn't think that. He wasn't like that. He was very humble. But easily, you try to find something, because you can't deal with the fact that someone is better than you at something. And this is what was happening here. All these other satraps, all these other administrators, they were looking at Daniel and they were just like, so the king likes him. The king thinks that he's all that and they think he's all great. So they tried to find something and they couldn't find anything. And see, this is actually something that the Bible talks about a lot. Daniel was doing something called living blamelessly. And now, at first, when I heard people say to live blamelessly, I thought that meant that you had to live perfect. But living blamelessly does not mean that you live perfect. It just means that you live your life out in the open, because there's nothing to hide. Because you know that what you're doing is not wrong. And even though you make mistakes, you make that open to God, and you don't try to hide that. And see, this is what Daniel was doing here. And because they couldn't find anything, these people, they go to King Darius, who was the king at this time, and they try to make up this thing. And they say, hey, you should make this decree that anyone who worships a god and does not worship you will be thrown into the lion's den. And so, he makes this decree not knowing that one of his best administrators, Daniel, worshiped God. He didn't really think about it when he was making this decree. And so he made it. And then, it says in 6:10, in Daniel 6:10, it says, "Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before." Now, isn't this crazy? This is not like he didn't know that this was happening. It's not like he didn't hear that this decree was happening. It says that after he heard this decree, he said, I'm going to still do what I've been doing. I'm still going to pray to God like I always do. And this guy, he wasn't praying to God in some secretive way. He didn't lock himself inside of a closet and start praying, like war room or something. No. He just said, hey, I'm just going to pray and I'm just going to be open about it, and I don't care what people think about it. And it says that he did this often, so this was like a regular thing for him. It says he prayed 3 times a day. How many of us actually pray 3 times a day? Besides food. Okay, because I know that's probably going to be the first thing. Really think about it. And think about how much this guy devoted to prayer, and how much this guy devoted to being close to God. And so after all this happens, the people, they're able to figure out, and so they all would go up to King Darius, and they're like, hey, yo, King Darius, he's doing the thing that you said not to do, and I don't like that. And so and they were just saying, hey, you better actually follow through on that, you better actually throw him in the lion's den, because that's what he deserves. And so King Darius, the funny thing about King Darius is King Darius did not believe in God, but King Darius knew that Daniel was doing too many good things. He was seeing all of the stuff that he was doing, and he was seeing how he did things he did things with integrity. And so he was able to notice that even though he wasn't Christian, even though he didn't believe in God, of course, Christian wasn't a thing that brought up yet. Anyway, so even though he didn't believe in God, he was able to see that. And so it says in Daniel 6:16, it says, so the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. Now, it would be different if that was a Christian guy that was saying this. If this was a believer that was saying this. But it wasn't. This is a pagan king. That's I don't know. That's just saying the leader of ISIS. Yeah, that's the first thing I can think of too. I'm glad we're on the same page. So the leader of ISIS just coming up and he's throwing you in. He's like, bruh, I don't believe in your God, but if your God is really who you said he is, he can save you from this. So he just threw him in. And he says, may God be with you. May the God whom you serve continuously. He knew that he was serving God continuously, but just the way that he did things, because he knew that he did things with integrity, and he knew that this guy actually devoted his life to prayer, and he devoted his life to God. And so in 620, before we get there, so they threw him in, and it says that King Darius could not sleep at night. He was so worried about this that he could not sleep, because he was so worried about the fact that he might be losing one of his best administrators. And so it says at the crack of dawn, he gets up and he goes straight to the lion's den because he wants to make sure that he's alive. And so in 6:20 he says, when he came near to the dead, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continuously, been able to rescue you from the lions? And Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. This guy was able to notice that he served a God, and he was able to notice that this God must be something real if this guy is willing to be thrown inside of the lion's den for it. He didn't turn away from his faith when things got hard. A lot of us do. But see, what you see here is that Daniel wasn't scared of what people could do to him. He was more scared of what God would do if he didn't live a life for him. And so after all this happens and the king notices that this guy's alive, he throws all the people that accused Daniel into the lion's den. He threw them and their families in there. So, I'm sorry. But if my dad did something, I'd be kind of mad. I'd be like, how you gonna get me thrown in there because you said something? That ain't my fault. As I'm getting eaten up by the lion. Oh my God, I hate you, Dad. Gosh. And so that's basically what happens there. And then after this pagan king, it says in verse 26, he says, I issue a decree that in every part of the kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And I think it's funny that we sung today how God is a God of miracles. And we sung that today, but do we really notice that God is the God of miracles? The same things that happened in the Old Testament can happen now. The same things that happened in the New Testament can happen now, because the same power that was able to shut the mouth of the lions can be able to get us through anything and everything that we can go through. And this is what they're acknowledging here. This is someone who didn't believe, but he saw something amazing. And he was like, there is no other evidence. There's no other thing that can be said about this, but that God, his God that he serves continuously, actually can do something and actually has power. And as we see this, we have to see the noticeable qualities of Daniel. First off, Daniel lived blameless. He did right in front of God and in front of man. You know, I always say that, being blameless is highly connected to talking with God. Because that's the second thing, he talked with God. You can't live blamelessly without talking to God. You can't really truly talk to God without living blamelessly. They both work together. But what does living blamelessly mean? I like to think of it like this. Honestly, I like to think of us, and we are all pretty fake if you really think about it. The reason why I say that is because ever notice that we act different ways in front of different friends? If we're around our friends that we know don't believe in God, we're of course going to talk more loosely. We're of course going to act more loosely because we're just like, these are just friends that don't believe in God, so what's the reason of actually showing it to them? And so we act a little bit different. But then when we're in church, we're like, hallelujah, thank you Jesus, you're the Lord, you're the God of miracles. But then, when we're with someone else, that's not what they're hearing. They hear a lot of words coming out of our mouth, but it ain't no tongues. Let me tell you. Some words that shouldn't be coming out of our mouth. Let's be honest. I have to think of myself, and I'm like, do I actually live the same words? Do I actually live out the same gospel that I like to talk about when I'm preaching? Do I live that out when I'm around the friends that don't believe in God? When I'm around people that do not believe in God, am I the same person? Living blamelessly means that you are willing to say, hey, I'm going to live openly, and people are going to see my life because I have nothing to hide. And see, that's scary because we're thinking of people. I'm not saying just between people. Mostly who you should be very open with is God. Because, see, the thing is, we try to be fake in front of God too. We try and act like we're living out this life. God, I'm trying my hardest. That's what we try to say. But then we know that we're not trying our hardest. We're just lying to God because we think that if we lie to him, then he won't notice our sin. Like he's not all-knowing. Like he's not all-powerful. Like he hasn't made everything. And so we tend to do this to ourselves, and we tend to try and hide things from God. Daniel didn't hide things from God because he talked to God continuously. And yes, he made mistakes, but he let God know that he made those mistakes. And he was able to tell God, hey, I've got a problem, and I need you to fix it. But he was able to acknowledge the problem. A lot of us don't acknowledge the problem, and that's where we end up in a lot of mess. Because how can you expect a doctor to heal you if you don't tell them that you need the healing? And so this is what happens with us. But this is what you see in Daniel. Daniel had hot faith because he would live blamelessly in front of God. Next, he didn't care about what others thought of the persecution. He didn't care about what others thought. And he did not care about the persecution that he might face. This guy was going to be thrown into a den of lions. Your first idea is probably like, so how can I get away with doing this without anyone knowing? I'm going to pray, but I'll pray in secret. But no, this was not something that he was thinking. He wasn't thinking, how can I pray in secret? How can I do this and hide this? He was saying, hey, I'm just going to do what I regularly do, and I'm going to serve the God that has got me this far. And he didn't care what other people had to think about it. Do we really live that way? Because I tell you, I got made fun of a lot in high school. when I started actually trying to live out the words that I was saying. I often talked about going to church. I often talked about living out the gospel, but I never actually did it. Up until about, I would say maybe junior, senior year, that was when I actually started changing around my life, because I was like, I actually need to start living this out. But when people come and they're going to make fun of you, is that the moment when you want to denounce God? The moments that when things get hard, because times will get hard. And if you join Christianity thinking that life would be easy because you're Christian, then I'm telling you, you went into the wrong faith. Because it does not get easier. Honestly, it gets harder once you start accepting God into your life and once you actually start trying to live out that word. And it's very easy for us to turn away when we're going to be thrown into a den of lions. But Daniel didn't do this. And this is what people that are in good standing with their faith do. They don't care what people have to say. They don't care what people think. They don't care what they might face. They are willing to stand up for God because they know that if they do not live for God, then they have died for nothing. Lastly, Daniel made a dynamic effect on his sinful environment. Daniel was in the middle of this place called Babylon. And if you guys don't understand, at this time there was so much idol worship. At this time there were people worshiping so many other gods. And he could have been thrown into that and been changed by that environment and said, hey, I'm going to stop believing in God. Hey, I'm going to stop trying to make this thing important. I'm going to stop trying to live out these Jewish traditions because now I'm in a different place. But he didn't do that. You know, one important quality about things that are hot is that if things are hot enough, when they touch other things, it's not like you lose their heat. They're still hot, and they actually make the other things warmer. Imagine if you guys went into a house and it had a heater, but when that heater started warming you up, it started losing all its heat. That wouldn't be a good heater. You're just like, bruh, you could have just like, that's not even worth it. I could have just worn a coat. I could have just worn a big overcoat. That would work better than having a heater that's going to break after it warms me up. That would make no sense. But a lot of us, we think that we can have faith like that. We think that we can be able to have faith and just say, hey, you know what? I'm living hot for God. I'm going to be doing all these great things. And then all of a sudden, when times get hard, you just give it up. And so you end up becoming like the environment around you instead of changing the environment. We are all put into a Babylon. We're all put into a place where there's so much sin around us, but we have to decide whether we're going to live out the life that God has called us to live, or whether we're going to let that environment change us. And as I go through the story of Daniel, the whole story of Daniel, the whole book of Daniel starts off with this simple thing. Daniel is put into this room, and he's put into this room with all these other kings and noblemen, and they're just like, hey, you should eat this. But he knew that he believed in the Jewish customs, and he was like, I can't eat the stuff that you guys eat. And he still did it. Everyone looked at him like he was crazy. They were just like, why aren't you eating like everyone else is? Why do you think you're better than everyone else? And then he's just like, I don't care. And you know, the funny thing is, as he was sitting there and he was giving that up, people were able to notice that he was actually healthier than the other people that were eating the other food. So they then forced everyone else to eat like Daniel was eating. When people start to notice that your diet, when people start to notice that your spiritual diet is better for you, and that your spiritual diet is going to lead them further, they're going to start abandoning their old ways, because they're just going to be like, hey, this dude has dealt with a lot. He's been through so much, but he didn't give up. He didn't stop following God when I started making fun of him. He didn't stop following God when some people in his family died. He didn't stop following God when things got hard. He kept following God. The God who you serve continually. If we're going to really serve the God that we say we want to serve, and we really want to say we have hot faith, we're going to have to live blamelessly in front of God. We're going to have to stop writing off the sins that we do and saying that some sins are better than others, or try and act like some sins are okay and some sins are a little bit more despicable. This is not how God looks at it. God sees all sin as the same. But a lot of the times when we come across a Bible verse that says something that we're not doing, the first thing we want to do is find an excuse onto why we don't do that. God says not to gossip, but then the first thing we want to do is want to talk about someone behind their back. God says that our mouth is important, and that our mouth is supposed to glorify Him and Him only. But we're the first ones to use inappropriate words. We're the first ones to use words to describe things that are not necessary and that are not of God. God says that we need to actually try and make our minds pure. We need to try and live in purity. But the first thing we do when we see someone walk by that we like, that looks pleasing to the eye, the first thing we do is lust after it. We see that God tells us to put Him first when we're getting our money and when we're doing tithe and offering. But then when the moment that we get something and we see something that looks really nice to us, that's what we want to spend our money on. And that's what we want to spend our time on. We don't really talk to God as much as we should. We don't really have the relationship that we should. And we're never going to affect the people around us with a terrible relationship with them. The last thing is, like I said, He made an effect on His sinful environment. I'm asking you guys today, are you guys going to let this world affect you, or are you going to affect the world? Are you going to change Babylon, or are you going to let Babylon change you? Are we going to go out of these walls and actually do something about our faith, or are we just going to keep talking about our faith? Because let me tell you, Daniel did not make an effect on the rest of Babylon by still just talking about God. He did not make an effect on the rest of his community by just saying, God is a great guy, we should follow Him. No, he made an effect because King Darius saw that he had something in him. He knew that he had integrity in everything that he did. He knew that he didn't take unnecessary shortcuts because he knew the God that he served. Do we know the God that we serve? Do we talk to Him? Do we actually try to live blamelessly? Do we actually think that He is more important than the persecution that we might face? Or do we turn away the moment that we could be thrown to the lions? Do we turn away the moment that someone says, you're stupid for believing that? Do we want to make an effect on our environment? You know, it's this idea of what people say, you need to be a thermostat and not a thermometer. Because the thermostat sets the temperature. The thermostat changes the temperature. But a thermometer just says, hey, this is the temperature. How many times are we just thermometers? Everything around us is sinful, so we are too. I want us to become the type of people where we live like Daniel did. Where we don't get so torn up by these things. We see the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These are Daniel's friends. And they're able to say, hey, even though I might be thrown into the furnace, turn up the heat. I'm not scared because I know the God whom I serve. Are we wanting God to turn up the heat? Are we wanting God to actually make us warmer? Because we talked about last week how we were lukewarm and how a lot of us have a lot of lukewarm qualities. But do we actually want to get hot in our faith? This is what it comes down to, because if you don't want to become hot in your faith, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to become hot in your faith, you're going to have to actually live out the way that God has wanted you to live. You guys can start the music. Because right now I want to lead us to a place where we're not being so affected by what people say around us. The song that I wanted to show and the song that we're going to be doing our altar call to is No Longer Slaves. Because I believe that a lot of us, we are slaves to healer. But He can only heal if we ask for the healing. He can only make an effect on us if we want Him to affect us. Because what help is it to have medicine but never take the pill? To have it to sit on the counter and not do anything. You have to take the pill. You have to make sure that you take the medicine. Just to give you an example. For me, the thing that I'm afraid of and the thing that I always worry about my future. I always worry about, where am I going to be in years from now? God, do you really have a hand on my life? I need to admit that to God before I can go any deeper. I need to admit to God that I need to have a purity in my thoughts. I need to be able to live for Him in everything that I do, and not just some of the things that I do. I have to admit to God that I have problems. Are you guys ready to do that? Are you guys ready to turn up the heat on your relationship with God? Because it doesn't matter what anyone says around you. It doesn't matter what I think. I can think so much about you, and I can think that you're walking out this faith, but only you and God know whether you're trying. Only you and God know whether you're still a slave to fear. I want us to start living blamelessly for God. I hope that you guys start praying and start telling God some of the things that you need fixed and some of the things that you need to work on, because we have to acknowledge it before we can fix it. Let's turn up the heat on our relationship with God.